Thank you everyone. So I'll play a little video first, and then off we go for the next hour.
Urbanization, new economies, and new technologies are driving huge business and marketing changes. The technology is empowering consumers, more informed, expecting transparency, demanding accountability, and challenging growth. Growing amounts of data, yet often lacking true insights. Today's insights and analytics world is changing at the speed of light, forcing business, marketing, and insights leaders to answer fundamental business questions. Are we truly consumer-centric? What insights do we require to guide our strategy? And how do we organize to win? That's why we've created Insights2020 to identify the drivers of and how to achieve true customer-centric growth.
So what an inspirational couple of days here at the AMA. So Russ opened with this idea of epic moments, and that really the small moments that we live every day and every hour are actually the ones that contribute to the big excellence that we look for in our lives, in our professions, in our families. And so inspiring message. And then right after that was Guy Kawasaki, and he spoke about jump to the next curve. And I do believe that consumer-centric growth, consumer centricity, is the next curve for marketing, for business, for our society in general. For me personally, this is a very, very special moment because I have spent the last 20 years or so studying human behavior, trying to understand what makes people tick. I started as a traditional economist, what they used to call neoclassical or rational economist at the time at Yale University. And I took a risk myself to go into behavioral economics, which at the time, trust me, was not that cool as it sounds today. It was actually the wrong move to make if you wanted to make it in academic economics. So I studied all of this human behavior, experiments, labs, and so forth and so on. And then this happened. Someone said in the previous speech that it's good to have a baby, any baby, because it makes the speech rate better. I hope that works for me too. So in the last 18 months, this small organism has challenged everything I know about human behavior. So I am back to basics. She has figured out things about my iPhone. She reprograms it like with her little fingers, and my iPad as well. So often it's very, very hard to get back in. She has erased tons and tons of information and data on it, and has taught me about human beings many, many different things. But one of the things that she really has taught me is about needs on demand. And for any parents here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I want to invite you on a little journey for the next hour about consumer centricity and what that really means and what that can bring to business and to life. So welcome to the Connected Ed Society. I've seen a lot of speeches here about the number of devices. I saw 35 billion devices by 2020, which is true. But then if you add to that all the devices that are in your car, in your home, that you don't actually own as a personal device, but is actually embedded in airplanes, in buildings, everywhere, it's actually over 200 billion devices. So this explosion of devices has done a lot of different things. It has affected how our needs are changing. It has affected where we can find people, what information we can find about people and about their lives. But not only can we truly serve our customers in a very unique way because of the devices, but also we must. Because if you think about, and that shows a bit that I'm a bit nerdy in these things. If you walk back like 100 years, competitive advantage was about scaling, about manufacturing, about operational effectiveness, and all of that by 1990 was outsourced completely and was able to be done in a very scalable way. And then the age of distribution came around, which was about logistical superiority, which worked pretty well and made many, many companies very successful in the latter part of last century. But even that, as the world became flatter and smaller, became less of a competitive advantage, and especially with e-commerce coming in and direct-to-consumer coming in, that really changed. And even information technology is something that today is a table stake rather than a weapon of competitive advantage. So how do we find competitive advantage? One of the ways, or in my mind, one of the biggest ways, is customer centricity or consumer centricity. But because we talk about B2B and B2C, we just have the customer at the center of this. And being able to understand their needs in real time and being able to serve them really makes a big, big difference as to how we can win in the marketplace of today. Now, consumer centricity or customer centricity is not new. It's been around, the concept has been around since the 50s and 60s, and in fact, many of the great brands that are represented in this room, many of the great brands that we use all the time, have actually been built on principles of consumer centricity. But what is new is the needs of the customers and how those are changing and how we can actually impact their lives in meaningful ways. And that's why this is quite important and quite timely. So Insights2020, which is the effort we started around a year ago, is meant to answer three fundamental questions. The first one is, how is consumer centricity linked to business? The second one is, what are the drivers of customer centricity? And the third one is, how do we achieve it in our own organizations? So to answer these questions, we enlisted a group of luminaries and experts and friends and partners. Here you see our advisory board, which is chaired by Keith Weed, CMO, and on the board of Unilever. And it represents high-level executives from companies out there, like WPP, like Unilever, like Verizon, but also key influencers, such as Jerry Wind from Wharton and Gail from the ARF. And this is just a small slice of the people who came to our support to really help with their thought leadership. But not only people, but also institutions like the AMA, and thank you very much, AMA, for this, and many people in this room truly helped open up the context they have, the behavioral databases they have. They even funded part of the research to make this as comprehensive and as complete of a study and as insightful. So what is the scope of Insights2020? Well, it is a massive study that practically is the largest ever done in this space of insights and analytics to really understand all of these trends and how they're impacting at a very high level and a very board level the future of our businesses. It looks at over 60 markets in over 400 categories. In order to design the study, we talked to over 300 people, CEOs, CMOs, heads of insights, academics, heads of brands, heads of agencies around the world to be able to really understand what are those key topics that a study like this should address and can address for business. And then that was followed by a quantitative study on which a lot of the quantitative pieces of information and insight I'm going to show you actually was based, which was brand leaders and business leaders like taking the survey from all sorts of companies from very small to very, very large. LinkedIn was very kind to offer us access to their behavioral analysis of over 600 million members that they have to understand their patterns, their movements. Wharton was very kind enough to give us access to their crowdsourcing tool of a panel of experts in order to quickly get insights, answer questions, understand examples of how people do this well, and a lot of research teams around the world working to make sure that the study is robust. So before we talk about the findings, let's define what consumer centricity or customer centricity really means. So in speaking with people, we found that this is not a tool, it's not a process, it's not a mission. What it is a strategy. It's a strategy that sits at the intersection of three key dimensions. The first one has to do with the customer needs and how those are changing over time. The second one has to do with the purpose or ideal that a brand has and the impact it wants to have on a consumer's life. And the third one is the commercial dimension, which is how does a company or brand actually monetize the relationship it has with the consumer. First and most important finding of the study is that the customer centricity is extremely strongly linked to business growth. So the more customer-centric we are, the faster we grow. It is not something that doesn't make intuitive sense. It is actually making a lot of intuitive sense. The great thing about it is that now we can quantify exactly how that works, and we can understand the drivers behind it. And it allows us to also understand what overperformers are doing and what underperformers are doing. So what are those companies that are growing faster? What drives that change and that growth in their business? But before we go into the specifics of the study and talk about drivers of overperformance and business growth, let's look at the opportunities that we saw across the board, which I think summarizes quite well a lot of the presentations that I saw today and yesterday. The first opportunity is around behavioral data. So companies for a long time have had access to information about people's attitudes through their market research, about the behaviors in terms of what products are the customers buying from them. But they had very little information about other behaviors that had to do with competitive purchase, had to do with attitudes between friends, online, offline. Whereas today, with the access to this data, we can really create profiles of consumers that encapsulates their whole life. Which then leads to the second opportunity that everyone talked about, which is turning insights into action across all touch points. So that is very important because today, as the speakers in this room right before me said, it's absolutely important to make sure that it's not only about the product or a service that the customer is getting, but a 360 experience that matters so much. Which then lends itself to the third opportunity, which is personalization. And anyone who has done millennial studies, and I'm sure all of you have read about 66% of millennials want this and 86% of them want that and so forth and so on. Generation Y is one that personalizes everything. Even the things that we find mundane. I'm not Gen Y. So even the things I find mundane, they want to personalize and want to make very much their own. But Generation Y can be spelled with the letter Y, or it can be spelled WHY. And that generation also wants much more meaning from the experiences they have. And so the fourth opportunity that especially overperformers look at is how do they activate the brand purpose they have? How do they actually use the data that they have about these customers to truly make a difference that goes beyond the product that they're selling? Now, There were also a common set of challenges to everyone that we spoke about. There were two buckets. One was more of a functional bucket that had to do with breaking silos, dealing with bureaucracy, legacy structures of the past, and functions that sort of get in the way of being able to operationalize this new connected consumer. And then there was another bucket, which was more holistic and more capabilities-led, especially true for overperformers, because overperformers actually have realized or have gone through this journey of understanding that it's not about breaking the silos. The silos in companies are created for a specific reason, which is to deepen expertise and be able to scale things. Overperformers, what they do is they understand that those silos have a reason for being, they honor them, and what they do is they orchestrate around them. And that's a huge role for marketing, because marketing can take a lot of these functional silos in a business and integrate them into a much, much bigger view, as Julie from MGM just told us. And the last challenge that overperformers find is this lack of whole brain talent. It's very, very difficult to find people in many organizations that really integrate that view of creativity and analytical kind of acumen, storytelling, business acumen. So finding people like that is difficult, and growing them is very important. In fact, when we started this study, we thought that it would be all about data and about megabytes and gigabytes and zettabytes and scientists. And in fact, what we found out was that customer centricity is much more of a leadership challenge, a human relationship challenge, rather than a science challenge. So, and I promise that they wrote these 10 before I saw Guy's presentation yesterday, but there are 10 drivers of customer-centric growth. And in the study, we looked at 66 different specific drivers, from the qualitative into the quantitative, and we were able to find what those 10 are, or, we didn't care how many they were, but they landed to be 10, so I'm lucky with that, because now you know exactly how much time we have until I'm done speaking, and you can sort of do what you want in Austin, which apparently there are diverging views as to if it's a great city or not a great city. So anyway, the 10 drivers were put into 3 dimensions. One has to do with the external market, so what the customer actually feels, experiences, does, and that is what we call total experience. The second dimension has to do with the internal lens, so a mindset that the company has in operationalizing the voice of the customer, and that we call customer obsession. And the third one is what we call Insights engine, which is the ecosystems that these companies and brands create to be able to harness the power of consumer centricity. So let's look at them one by one. Total experience has 3 dimensions. The one is about leading with purpose and being able to truly operationalize the purpose that a brand has with the consumer. The second one is customize the experience through data. And the third one is about creating consistency across all touch points. So overperformers link everything they do to a brand purpose. And if we look at the journey here, looking deeper into this driver across brands, we see that the journey starts with brand communications and being able to actually say what you believe, which still is not true for many, many brands. So even that is a big first step. Secondly is to be able to infuse what you believe into the product cycle, into the innovation cycle. At a higher level, it's about being a North Star for all decisions that a company makes. And I have the Red Bull example here. Many, many people know about Red Bull and the 3 questions that every employee knows that they need to ask in order to know whether something is consistent with the purpose that Red Bull has. And fourth is to create a societal movement. So if you truly believe on something that is bigger than yourself, you can actually create categories outside the traditional silos. And that's what Red Bull obviously has done for the last few years with creating an energy category and an experience category. And anyone who has come in contact with the Red Bull brand, whether that is in a consumer co-created event or whether that is having a Red Bull in a club in Ibiza, understands the purpose of the brand immediately and internalizes that, which is to uplift mind and body. Overperformers also create experiences that are really based on data and on real deep data-based insight. So if we think about developing a brand positioning or an innovation territory, segmentation is a very powerful tool. And if we want to actually activate our communications and our retail, actually micro-targeting is a very powerful thing. But full one-on-one, which was not possible up until now is possible. So I love this example from Allstate, where basically they allow you to reduce your insurance premium by having a sensor in your car, and that sensor tells Allstate how you're driving, and therefore they don't need to know your age, they don't need to know your gender, they don't need to know anything. What they need to know is your behavior. So that's real full one-on-one marketing. Second dimension of the customer-centered growth is around customer obsession, embraced by all functions in the organization. It's a leadership priority at the top level of the organization. It's about collaboration, co-creation with the consumer, and it's about experimentation. So for overperformers, customer centricity is embraced by all levels in the organization and all functions. In fact, it turns out to be the strongest driver that can predict consumer-centric business growth like for companies. And I was with Eric Ryan the other day, founder of Method, and I found this example so interesting. Not only are they a customer-centric brand in the sense of everything that they do and create takes into account what the emerging consumer really wants, but also they've created these partnerships with Target and others which really allow them to live their purpose. This made to matter the business within Target is now over $1 billion and actually allows co-creation with even their competitors such as Burt's Bees and Seventh Generation. Overperformers consistently make customer centricity a priority for leadership, and they infuse it in all the KPIs they have. So our friends at Anheuser-Busch InBev are fantastic at that. It's not only about advocating customer centricity in the organization from the top, but also translating that into personal incentives, and finally actually making it a guiding principle and a mantra in the organization. Experimentation, which I think is one of the wildest findings that we saw that predicts future growth for these businesses. Overperformers systematically embrace risk taking and experimentation. Yet even the proportion of overperformers that experiment is low. And the reason for that is no surprise. The corporation as an institution was created to minimize risk. It was created to scale things and to actually reduce variability. So how do we expect these large companies now to then change how they think? And this is the part of embracing the paradox here of these large companies doing two things at the same time. On the one hand, they need to be able to create consistency and scalability while at the same time take risks and try new things. So examples here, LinkedIn was a very, very stark example for us when we started working with them on Insights2020. We went to them and asked, well, would you be willing to be a partner to us? And we spoke to a research executive, and she said, yes, sure. And then she looked at the brief and said, absolutely, we want to do this. And we said, well, don't you have to talk to someone, senior in the organization or a board member or the CEO or something? She said, no, we are empowered here to actually make these calls. And that is the kind of attitude that Silicon Valley has done extremely well and is leading the way. And so a couple of more examples from there. Amazon, Guy Kawasaki talked yesterday about how complete the offer is with Amazon Prime and the whole line of business in the offer. And yet, in order to achieve that complete offer, Amazon takes this view of it's okay to fail in many, many projects in order to make sure that we get on the next curve. And the last example around this is Google. We all know that Gmail came out of an experimentation mindset and a culture that takes risks that really changes the game for that company. And in many ways, if we think about the size of that company, $60 billion is not small. So the ability to really co-create even at that level and take risks at that level really makes a big difference for how they're growing. And the last dimension that we talk about is Insights Engine, the ecosystem of these companies and how they really set up for success. Here it's about the leading role of insights and analytics as a concept in the organization. It's unlocking the power of data and being able to connect it and translate it. And finally, it's about critical capabilities in the organization. So Overperformers, INA leads the business in key areas, and in many instances, the Insights and Analytics function reports to the CEO. At Tata, who is also an advisory board member, Harish actually sits on the board of Tata and sits on the management team of many of the subsidiaries they have, and he's an insights executive with a huge voice. And Insights takes not only a supporting role, which is stage one, not only an inspiring role, not only a challenging role, but actually a leading role in the business, which totally makes sense in an environment where you really need to be close to the consumer to be able to make calls that will change your business. That kind of organization really helps propel the business forward. And finally, the last driver we'll talk about has to do with critical capabilities embedded in the organization. Overperformers understand that they need those in order to deal with the different level of complexity today than ever before and the rate of change than ever before. So it is about embedding those capabilities of business sense, of whole brain thinking, and of storytelling in order to propel the organization into action. And the favorite example I have, I'm very proud of the guys at Marriott and what they've done over the last 3 years in terms of really transforming their business from a customer-centric way through their capabilities. So not only are they good at research and analytics, which many companies are, but they take that to a business acumen level. They infuse creative thinking in everything they do. They use storytelling to influence the board, and they set direction. So especially for a business that actually has so much capital-intensive assets and is quite an established business, who would have thought that Marriott over the last 5 years would have made the transformational journey that they've made, and it's all about that capability and being able to infuse creativity with analytics. So in recapping, the 10 drivers have to do with total experience, have to do with customer obsession as an internal lens and have to do with the ecosystem that we call the Insights engine. Now, what this research does, and that's why it's so powerful, is that it allows us not only to understand the scores, but also to be able to then say, well, how do those scores in a company actually compare to the benchmark of the Insights 2020 study? And then it allows us to set an ambition of saying, well, where do we want to move the needle? Where are we good? Where are we not good? What do we want to achieve? How fast do we want to do that? And the study allows us to also then create the business case because it's linked directly to business growth, and so we can quantify that. So what are some of the learnings that we can immediately take out of this? The first one is that beyond focusing on products and services, we can start focusing on the total experience. And there are many brands who are doing this well, and there are many brands that are still nascent in that journey towards the total experience. The second one, and when I saw this the first time as I was reading the findings from our research team, is going beyond focusing on the detail of the data to actually focusing on the actionability of the data. And because I've been in management consulting for a while now, I was like, well, but this 80-20 rule, we've known it forever. It's not only the what, but as Stan from Unilever says, it's the so what and the now what. So we know this, right? But the thing is that when you look at the responses in the data, the reality is that a lot of effort is spent on data scientists, a lot of work is spent on actually making the data better and better and better, which of course is very important, but actually the actionability of it is still quite low in the findings of the study. So still we haven't been able to really weaponize the data that we have. The third one is going beyond managing risk to embracing the paradox of managing risk and experimenting. And this is not an option. I don't think this is something that we can wait and see if it's going to work. This is a mindset that we really need to make sure that that we infuse in our organizations, because the rate of disruption is so fast that I say to people, if you take a study of 6 months of how to play, where to win and so forth and so on, by the time that you finish the study, the assumptions that you have in the study are wrong because the market has changed so fast. So experimenting in real time is actually extremely important while keeping the train going. So I know it's difficult, but it's important, and that embracing of that paradox is very important. And finally, it's about going from delivery to the customer, which of course needs to be checked off the box, to co-creating and innovating with the customer, especially millennials, especially the younger generation, and especially when Penelope will be able to buy with her dollars all the goods and services that we offer. Co-creation, being able to create with the consumer what they want and what they see as experiences is going to be very important. So what are next steps? So next steps are to really understand these levels of excellence in each of these 10 drivers. And I invite every one of you to share stories with us as to how you've gone from step 1 to step 2, or from step 4 to step 5. We don't want to see Insights 2020 as a study. Actually, what we want to do is we want to make sure that this is a movement, that we want people to join the conversation. We think that customer centricity is the next curve, is the next frontier for business and for marketing, and it is about being able to collate these great stories that help marketing and business move forward in this very, very new space.